There we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the new look of Tifara Ruth.
Leah, this is me in work mode.
That's okay. You look awesome.
Thank you.
You clean
The
up
first,
really nice. Okay, so I asked the group, for anybody who's watching, if you had any questions that have come up for you, even random questions. I'd love
my
to
first
hear about anything at
question,
all, because sometimes that also sparks what topics we're going to learn.
the
So,
topic
Tifara
of
Ruth, do you have
the,
something?
the topic of tattoos. Um,
Oh, that's an
I
interesting
know.
topic.
I'm actually so prior to my mikvah date, I'm having a tattoo, like I guess revised, I guess you would say.
What do you do for it?
Um, when you say, uh, ask me that
What
again, I'm
does
sorry.
that mean? I mean, are you having it removed?
I'm not having it removed. I'm just having it, I'm making a modification to it.
What is it, something that doesn't feel appropriate?
Yeah, so it was a dagger, but it looks very cross-like.
Oh,
So I'm having it changed into a Hamza. Um,
oh, that's awesome. Even though it's kind of funny to do a
I know,
tattoo
right?
before, right? It's kind of ironic, but I get it.
So
Did
I
you
guess
discuss that with Rabbi Mintz?
so that's one of the things we're gonna obviously talk about. We have like a pre-mikvah meeting scheduled, I
Right.
think next week. So
But you
as you
have
know,
to heal from it, right?
so yes, so the timing I have perfect because I don't want my skin to flake or there to be any, anything that would make me, I hate to use the word impure, but going into the,
It's not impure, but it
yeah, I
can
know. I
be
knew that
right,
wasn't
right,
the
right.
right word, but I was like, I
I
don't know
mean,
what.
we say spiritually maybe impure, maybe that's better. I don't like to use
Okay,
the word
right.
unclean
Okay.
because that doesn't work for me.
Right. I understand. That makes total sense. So then
Right,
I
so you'll
guess my
discuss that.
question is, I know the Torah is pretty much, against tattoos, but then like what about, what I guess is the advice I guess you would give for especially converts who were previously tattooed, and what is your take on the whole tattoo thing?
Well, I mean, my take is the same take as halacha, which is Jewish law. Honestly, I've seen tattoos personally since you asked my personal. I've seen beautiful tattoos that are very flattering and beautiful and special. I mean, it's not my style to like, even if I could do tattoos to put a lot on, but I could see that there are ones that are very special and beautiful and meaningful for people. In fact, I was in Hawaii at one point, and that's part of their culture is
Mhm.
they actually put the lineage in tattoos, and there were different families that have different tattoos, which felt like it was very powerful. However, it is forbidden according to halacha. So that takes out any question I might have about having tattoos. But given that, you can't change your past. I mean, you can't change what happened in the past.
Right, because we're not
So
required to remove
no,
them.
no, and that's a very painful procedure
Right.
from what I
So
understand. I
so
mean,
it is
that could
kind of like
partly
a
be, part of that is comfort level. It depends on where the tattoo is, how visible it is, and how comfortable you might feel. Because I guess somebody who has a tattoo that's very visible, it's a little bit announcing to anybody, I either converted or I became observant. I mean, it could be either one. So that's comfort level. And that's again
right.
not something that I can dictate to anyone. My feeling is anybody who comes fully and embraces our religion and our culture and belief in God and our people, it doesn't matter to me that they have tattoos.
Got it.
That's
Okay.
that's
Thank
my
you.
that's my take on it. I
Okay.
don't
Thank
think the
you so much.
tattoos detract. even if it was, I mean, that wouldn't be converting. Even if there was somebody Jewish who had, done tattoos and then became observant and therefore did not feel comfortable with their tattoos anymore. So that's part of their past. So whether they decide to remove it, sometimes it can be removed, sometimes not, more painful, less painful. I don't know exactly what the story is. But I have for me, there's no impediment. That to me does not feel like an impediment to somebody becoming Jewish. I don't see it in any way.
Okay.
I guess you should mention
Okay.
it. I don't know
Give
if,
me just 1 second. Oh,
sure.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna mention it to Rabbi Mintz for sure.
I think you
We have a
should
free
only be,
mitzvah call.
yeah. So I don't know if, which mikveh you're going to, but
Okay.
maybe the mikveh lady has to know. I don't know, or maybe not.
Okay. All right. I'll definitely follow up for sure.
So thank you. So anybody who's thinking of getting a tattoo, if you're on the road to converting, not the best idea.
Yeah,
If it
for
happened
sure.
before, that's one thing, but it'll be very weird to get it on the journey. That's a great
I have a
question.
question
Yeah,
that's slightly related.
sure.
Where is the line like with piercings and body piercings in general?
Mm-hmm.
And also, I guess like to extend that, if like damaging body modification, or like I don't know how you would say it, is like what's prohibited, is like plastic surgery prohibited? Like what, I guess like where's the line with all of that stuff?
That's a great question. I don't think it's a clear line. I will admit I haven't looked into this, so I could look into it. I could look into it. I think the issue with plastic surgery, and I think that there are people who do plastic surgery, is about, are you allowed to put yourself in danger? Because every surgery has danger involved, right? Using anesthetic, or it just has an element of danger. The vast majority of surgeries are, even if they're, what's the word if you choose it? Elective. Even if they're elective, they're very commonly elective because of a physical issue or physical problem. And that was the direction you went. I'm saying elective, meaning you schedule it, as opposed to right now, you have to take care of something. Like if somebody, God forbid, they break a bone, a limb, then it has to be done right away, right? You don't wait for, it's not really an elective surgery. But there are other surgeries like bunions, so that's still elective in the sense you could live with it, but your quality of life may be so challenged that you really don't want to. So I would say that feels about balancing the choice of taking on something that is dangerous with beautifying yourself, but it could also be rectifying of a disfigurement, something that's disfiguring in your body or feels disfiguring to you. So that's, when you ask for the line, I think it's a hard line to draw. That's as far as I know. But I believe that the reason it's forbidden would be about, we're not supposed to damage ourselves for sure, and we're not supposed to put ourselves in danger without need. So how do you define need? If I know somebody who did not feel good about themselves, and they went through for whatever it was, a type of plastic surgery. It was somewhat major, but they were like a different person afterwards because they were more comfortable with those body parts. Somebody else might say, what difference does it make? But not for them. So whether it's, fix a nose or something in the face or whatever it is. So I don't know if was that helpful, putting in a context for you, Chelsea?
Yeah,
As far
that's
as
helpful.
I know, that's the main issue of doing. Yeah. Great question though about surgery. Anything else?
And then piercings are just like
Piercings,
good, because I
right?
know it
Piercings.
mentions piercings
So it doesn't say
or-
piercing, because piercing just basically means doing earrings other places. Is that what piercings are?
yeah, I guess earrings in your ears and elsewhere.
Right, but right. So there is something about a male, I don't know if it's only male, maybe female as well, slave, Jewish slave, which we don't generally have nowadays, who wants to stay with their master or mistress for more than 6 years, which is the allotted time. And then you're supposed to put a hole in their ear and like put it through to the doorpost. I don't know if this actually ever happens, but that's the part that I know about, about making a hole in the ear. I don't know any that would go along with, I guess you could call a disfigurement of some kind, right? But it's been accepted. In fact, it's in the Torah. The nezem is one of the, a nezem is a nose ring, which we don't usually, I mean, that's not as common in nowadays, but it was actually offered to Rebecca, one of our foremothers, by Abraham's servant when he was looking for a bride for Abraham's son Isaac, Abraham's son Yitzchak. So he offered her bracelets, and I believe he offered her a nezem as well, which is a nose ring. So that would show that jewelry for women is generally okay, including I have pierced ears. It was painful when I did it, but I'm very happy I did it. So I guess piercings would go along with that. I think one of the problems is when somebody has piercings, that can they remove them to go to the mikveh, the ritual immersion. But there are some piercings that you just never, ever, ever remove unless, I don't know, I guess if it got infected, you'd have to remove it. So that would be pretty much considered part of the body, and then you could immerse with it. Right? We said that you have to take off your rings and you have to take off your earrings, but there may be parts that there may be piercings that you don't have to remove. I've never personally had that question, but I could check into it. But I don't think it's a problem in general to have piercings. That's considered beautifying, but it could be looked at as causing some sort of damage to your body. Could look at it that way. Any other questions that are piquing people's interest, or questions on topics that we've learned? We did 3 on life cycles. We've done anything about holidays, perhaps. Did we talk about the leap year and having a 2 Adar, months of Adar, and that's how the calendar gets knocked back into place, because the holiday of Pesach, of Passover, must be in the spring, and the holiday of, I guess, Sukkot must be in the fall, and etc. And if we didn't have a leap year every 2 to 3 or 4 years, I think it's 7 times in 19 years. That feels correct. I'm not sure, but it feels correct. Could be 5 times. But if we don't have it that often, what'll happen is that the lunar cycle will just keep on adjusting because it doesn't quite match up with the solar cycle. And if those who are familiar with Islam, the Ramadan, for example, moves around the calendar because they don't adjust with the leap year. So the lunar month, that's Ramadan, just keeps getting pushed a little bit. So sometimes it's in the winter and sometimes it's in the summer. But we don't have that. We knock it back. We catch the calendar back and tether it back to the lunar cycle by having a leap year every 3 years or so. A leap year meaning a leap month, as opposed to the solar calendar, where a leap year means 1 extra day in February. And that's because it loses like a quarter of a day. I don't know exactly how it is, but the full solar year is not exactly 365 days. So we're now in the first Adar, and we're halfway through, a little more, and soon we'll be celebrating the second Adar, which is the month of Purim, month when Purim falls out. Yeah, which is arguably one of the happiest days on our Jewish calendar. Okay, any other questions? Any thoughts that have come up for people? Questions or thoughts? By the way, speaking of braids, one of the things that you're not allowed to do on Shabbat is make a braid. Did you know that? Any thoughts why you can't make a braid on Shabbat? I'm not talking about twisting just the hair around, I'm talking about with the at least 3 a braid. Any
Is it
thoughts, Dwight?
considered like weaving?
It would be like weaving. Yes, I believe it's like weaving. Thank you, Gabby. And it's like weaving, and it also is kind of permanent. It doesn't just come out on its own. That's partly why it's considered like weaving. So for those who have girls, let's say if you want to do a braid, you have to do it before Shabbat or do it with two strands, which obviously doesn't look exactly like a braid. Okay. All right. Well, I hope that the other Gabby will join us soon. She said only after 7 o'clock her time, which is 8 o'clock our time. So let's talk about blessings of food. Before we go into the source sheet, why don't people here chime in on blessings before food? Do we remember, some of you may have been in the class last year, if it is rabbinic or biblical are we commanded to say a blessing before food? It's okay if you don't remember or if you weren't here. So here's the thing. There's only really one blessing that is biblical or that's explicitly written out in the Torah. Does anybody know which blessing that is relating to food, actually?
Would it be the hamotzi?
Great guess. Not right, but a great guess. But it's connected to hamotzi. So it turns out that the only blessing that's written in the Torah is Birkat Hamazon, which is what is called the grace after meals, which is the blessing of mazon. Mazon is food, and the real food, Chelsea, is bread. So we only say Birkat Hamazon after we eat a meal with bread, which is what comprises a meal, even though you can get very full without it. But, our sages always define the parameters of all mitzvot, and the parameter of being able to say the grace after meals, the full one, the big one, is that you had a meal with bread. Now, who remembers how you define bread? Which, Chelsea, you're right, it's the ones that you say hamotzi, but which ones are those?
Is it something made with the 5 grains?
Great. Well, something, but not everything, because you could have a cookie that could also be made.
Oh, yeah.
So first of all, let's go through the 5 grains. Browse. Remember, we found an acronym browse. B.
Barley.
R. That's
Rye.
the toughie. Rye, good. O. Everybody
Oat.
else, you could unmute, really. Yeah. Oat. That's the only one that doesn't have gluten. So that's the one that I use. W.
Wheat.
That's the easiest, wheat, yeah. And S is?
Spelt.
Spelt. Okay, so we have 5 grains. Browse is the acronym, BROWS, barley, rye, oat, wheat, and spelt. Those 5 grains can be made into mizonot. That's the blessing. We'll get to it, which is cookies, cakes, pasta. I think that's most of it is cookies, crackers, cakes, crackers, pasta. Or they can be made into bread. If it looks like bread, if it acts like bread, we pretty much treat it as bread. So, but only those 5, which is why gluten-free people who are not eating something made of oat, rice flour, tapioca flour, I don't know what else, lentil, quinoa, there are so many different ones. All of those, they do not make anything that you say mizonot on or that you say hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and therefore they would not make a meal. That's what I eat most of the time. If I eat cookies or crackers or cakes or any of those, they're generally not, they're not bread or they're not real bread. And therefore we wouldn't say the grace after meals, the Birkat Hamazon. So Gabby, who just joined us, the other Gabby or the first Gabby, what we were saying is that there's only one blessing that is mideoraita, that is biblical from the Torah. And that is the blessing we say after we eat. Now, I don't know if you know that there's a verse that it comes from. It comes from the verse, "Ve'achalta v'savata uberachta," and you will eat, and you will be satisfied, and you will make a blessing. So it's very clearly in the Torah that this is a biblical blessing, but it's the blessing that we say after we eat, at the end of a meal. Remember, this is only for a meal, and a meal, according to our sages, is when you ate bread of these 5 grains, any of these 5 grains. Everybody with me so far? If I lost someone, let me know. Okay. What's the difference between making a blessing before food and after food? And I want to hear your thoughts. What does it signify? What does it signal to make a blessing before food and after food? It's not a test. I really would love to hear your thoughts.
I feel like before food, you're blessing the food, and after you're thanking
Wait, what is,
God for the
one second,
meal.
what does that mean, blessing the food? Can you be more specific what that means?
I don't know.
Right, because blessing the food is a hard it's a concept, it's done. But what, no, wait, but I interrupted you. You were going to say, you said, what does it mean after the food?
Is giving thanks.
Is giving thanks, yes. So I agree that after the food is giving thanks that we ate and we are full and we are satiated, or it was delicious, hopefully. Not always, but we hope it is. So what does it mean to say a blessing before the food? Before you eat of the food. So Chelsea suggested blessing the food, but we're not quite sure what that means. I'm not sure that's a Jewish concept, by the way, just saying.
Yeah, I
No,
think like
yeah,
from like directly translating it, like it feels like you're acknowledging that God made the food.
nice. You're acknowledging that God made the food. Perfect. So if you're acknowledging that God made the food, which is very different from blessing the food, maybe you want to say it is a blessing, but we will look at the actual blessings. So if you're acknowledging that God made the food, then what is the purpose, or what is the role that the blessing before the food might take? Latoya, did you want to chime in?
Oh, I did, but
You're unmuted. It's fine.
What was I gonna say? Yes, I was actually gonna say something along what Chelsea last mentioned, which was just giving thanks to God for creating, the items that you're gonna eat, the wheat, the bread.
So
and
you think
bread.
it could, right? So maybe it is giving thanks before, which makes sense also. Thank you for giving me this apple. Apple's always easiest. So and then thank you that I had it and it was delicious. And maybe it's also thank you, I don't know, for my digestive system and that I'm able to incorporate, whatever. So it could be thanks before or after, before and after, 100%. Any other ideas? Jeff?
Well, we're also trying to elevate what we're doing. So this is
That's nice.
an act that animals do, and we want to
Nice.
raise ourselves above the animals to
Be
greater,
thoughtful.
a higher species and created in the image of God, so that we're elevating the act to a spiritual level.
Very nice. That's interesting. That actually goes nicely, Chelsea, with what you said, blessing the food. It's not exactly blessing the food. Maybe it's more about blessing the act of what we're doing, that we acknowledge it's not, even though we're doing it for pleasure and because our body needs sustenance, but it adds a moment of thoughtfulness. It's taking a moment and pausing, talking to God, and recognizing that the food came from God. So all of these pieces fit very nicely together. Thank you. I like it. I have one more thing to add, but does anybody else have something to add before I say what I have to add?
Mhm.
Going back to what you said, Chelsea, that we're acknowledging that the food actually belongs to God, it actually gives us permission to eat the
Belongs
food.
to God.
It's similar to stealing food from God if we don't say a blessing. Now, I'm not saying you forget, you don't remember what it is. So then, if you don't remember the blessing, just say in your mind or say with your words, blessed are you, God. I'm asking you to eat this fruit. I acknowledge. You could say that. That's fine. But that's really the way it's referred to in our literature, although I really like the spirituality of adding the other pieces. I think that's really, really important, which is why when people ask me, how do I start praying? Say, well, actually, you have a really easy opportunity to stop at many moments during the day, acknowledge God's presence by making a blessing, a bracha or a bracha before you eat food. It gives you a moment of spirituality. It gives you a moment to thank God. And somebody once said, you can, where was that? You can even take the time to think about how this food came to be here, all the way from, even the apple, from the apple orchard, somebody picked it, somebody put it into bins, the farmer delivered it to somewhere else. They packaged it up in a, styrofoam, maybe, unless it's farmer's market, and put plastic on top. Then you went to the supermarket and you had to buy it. And then you brought it home, put it in your fridge, which kept it fresh. Although I actually put my apples out on the counter, but that's separate. And so you could think about all the pieces. Now, I don't think we can think about that about every single bite that we eat. We just don't have enough time in the day to think about it, but occasionally we can. And it really is considered that it gives us permission to eat the food. Now, here's the logic that our sages came up with. They said, if the Bible, if the Torah, remember we said this is the only biblical blessing. If the Torah, well, no, it's the only biblical blessing, perhaps over food. I'm not sure if there's another biblical blessing. Then if the Torah commands us to make a bracha after we ate, to acknowledge, it must be that for sure it assumes that we're making a blessing before. That's their logic. They say there's no way that a person could take an item of food when they're hungry and not ask God for permission to eat from it. Rather, they say the reason that we're commanded to make a bracha afterwards is because once somebody is full and satiated, they may not feel the same feeling of gratitude because they're not hungry. They may move on with their lives and just go on to do something else and not take the time to stop and say thank you. It feels like, okay, I'm full, I'm done with eating, let me just go on with my life, go back to, no, but actually the Torah tells us you have to stop and you have to say specific blessing. Now that's the longest blessing, grace after meals. There are shorter ones that we say, remember we said, that's only after you wash for bread. And remember we spoke about that, where you have to wash your hands ritually before eating bread. And there's a special blessing to say. Did everybody get that so far? About the brachot, the blessings before? And so that's why the blessings before are considered rabbinic, because the rabbis, the sages, are the ones who set them up. They're the ones who said, we are understanding that the Torah just assumes that we're going to say a blessing before. So it has to command us to say the blessing after, because it is not obvious in the Torah or to God that people will take the time to say thank you afterwards once they are full. Now let's look at our source sheet or the first of the two. Just a moment. Let's look at our source sheet and see. So here we go. Did you know we are required to make a blessing before eating food, rabbinic, and also after we eat a meal, biblical? Our rabbis reasoned, if we need to thank God after eating when we are satiated, it must be that we need to ask permission before eating. And this is the source somewhere. Where is that? I see there's a footnote. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's a different footnote. Okay. These are the blessings that we make on food. I just want you to know that I made a separate one here just to give you a one-pager that has all of the blessings, because I wanted to give you an opportunity to print out one page, and that would have all the blessings that we need. I want to go through the different categories of foods. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 different blessings that we make on food. And this is the order of their importance, meaning if you could choose in front of you to say, to have 2 items of food and you needed to choose which one to say first, you should go according to this. But also, it means that some of them subsume some of the others within, meaning the most general of all blessings, you theoretically could say it for any type of food. And that would be actually the one on the bottom, Shakol Nihiya Bidvaro, through whose word all things were called into being, that everything came into being from God's word. So that can cover any kind of food. But if we have a blessing that is Borei Peri Ha'adama, that one who creates the fruits of the earth, this is specifically the earth, that is not going to cover when we make crackers. But it can cover an apple, because an apple grows from a tree, but it also comes from the earth. So this blessing, Borei Peri Ha'etz, one who creates the fruits of the tree, it'll be good for anything that comes from a tree, but it will not be good for anything like tomatoes, cucumbers, vegetables that generally don't come from a tree, they come from the ground. And there's botanical classifications, but our sages set up very specific criteria, and there are plenty of contests, usually in schools, among kids, where they memorize and they try to remember for each type of food, what is the bracha. So some of them are obvious on bread or on an apple. Those are obvious. But here's something that's not obvious. On a potato, you say something called Borei Peri Ha'adama. That's this one who creates the fruits of the earth, because a potato does not grow on a tree. So you wouldn't use the one for tree. But what about potato chips? What do you make on potato chips? It does grow from the ground, but what, right? So do you understand what I'm saying? There are many different, like popcorn or corn, and there are many different nuances in blessings. You're not going to remember all of them. I sometimes need to look up for myself as well if I'm not 100% sure. But over time, you learn, especially if you eat a lot of potato chips, you're going to remember what's the blessing. If you never eat potato chips, you may not know. That's just one example of that. So let's go into the different ones. The most important blessing is the one we spoke about, which is said over bread, baked, as we said, from this. Let me just put that into. Okay. If it's baked from one of these 5, 1, 2, 3, one of these 5 grains, and it has to look like bread and act like bread. My mother, who's a phenomenal baker, she makes challah, and she makes something she calls coffee cake, which is like a cinnamon. It's delicious. Both of them are delicious. Even if I used to be able to eat gluten, it was impossible to stop eating them. They're so delicious. And I never baked with that particular recipe because I never baked with yeast. That just wasn't one of the things. I made delicious cakes, but I just never did yeast as a rule. And she said it's the same recipe that she uses for her challah as she uses for her coffee cake. The difference being that the challah looks like challah, acts like challah, tastes like challah, but her coffee cake she makes with raisin water, and she adds cinnamon and sugar and other items to make it more sweeter, and it acts like a cake. It looks like cake and acts and tastes like a cake. So there are nuances and difference there, but basically you can go according to that criteria. Everybody with me so far? And remember, it has to be from one of these 5 grains. That's just the way our sages defined it. They said these were the 5 major grains that people at the time, at least, made bread out of. Today, people make bread out of all sorts of stuff, because particularly for people who are gluten-free, So they use a lot of other kinds of flours as well. Gluten-free bread is generally not something to write home about. I only recommend it if you're like me that you can't have gluten. Don't think that I don't think you're gaining anything in your life to eat those breads unless you really can't have gluten. So that would be hamotzi lechem min haaretz, one who brings forth bread from the earth. And if you look on top, everybody should have the link. They all begin with this beginning, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Lord, our God, ruler of the universe, who brings out bread from the earth, who creates the fruit of the vine, who creates various kinds of baked goods, creates the fruits of the tree, the fruit of the tree, creates the fruit of the earth, and one who, through whose word all things were called into being. And that just basically covers everything that wasn't covered before. And if for some reason you said that blessing, even on something that is part of these, you're still able to fulfill the commandments of saying a blessing by using that general one. Okay? Everybody with me so far? Okay. It's interesting that the wine or grapes that's made into a drink, like wine or grape juice, have their own blessing. Any other fruit juice, tomato juice, orange juice, grapefruit juice, any other juices you can think of, any kind of citrus juice. There are different kinds of citrus juices. There's pomegranate juice. There's cranberry juice. Did I say that? I don't remember if I said cranberry juice. So all of these are juices. Why does it changes the blessing to be shehakol niya bidvaro? That it's the general one for all food that either does not grow from the ground or is highly processed. So if you take oranges and you squeeze them and turn them into orange juice, you can't see oranges in there. There's no oranges left, even if you have pulp, although it's possible if you have a lot of pulp that you would make a blessing, borei peri ha'etz, one who creates fruits of the tree, because you're actually eating fruit. But if you're not eating the fruit anymore, but just eating the liquid squeezed from it, then the blessing changes. Everybody with me so far? The only one that's different is the borei peri hagafen, that one who creates the fruits of the vine. Anything made with grapes is a borei peri hagafen, which is something that we use when we make kiddush on Shabbat and on holidays, on Yom Tov, on Chagim, another word for holidays. Now that means that, did you have a question, Chelsea?
I think there's a typo in the source sheet. It's
I'm sure there is.
Oh, right?
Yeah. It's the opposite. Perfect. That's why I'm fixing all the typos now. Shehakol nihiya bidvaro. Thank you. Very helpful. We were visiting my mother-in-law, and she had something called Manischewitz blackberry wine. And I think my mother-in-law was using it for kiddush. And I said, I don't think we can use it for kiddush. Even though it says wine, it does not have a borei peri hagafen bracha, because it's not made from grapes, unless I believe it has to be over 50% of it must be made from grapes, but it didn't say anywhere that over 50%. Now it was alcoholic, however they did that, but we couldn't use it for kiddush because you can't say borei peri hagafen on it. You can't say you created the fruits of the vine because it wasn't made from fruits of the vine. And I actually wrote to them. They never answered me. But the next time we came there, when my mother-in-law had a new bottle, it said, the blessing on this is shehakol, meaning you can't make the blessing of borei peri hagafen. So somebody wised up, or they read my email and realized they made a mistake, or maybe other people sent it to them. They never thanked me. I think that would have been nice, but they didn't. But I was just happy that it wasn't leading people astray, because people wouldn't know. It says blackberry wine, but it says wine, it has alcohol, and it says wine. So you think, oh, maybe it has 50% grapes. They're not even aware. They didn't do it on purpose. All right, how are we doing with this? Everybody good? Yes, Jeff.
What's the
Jeffrey.
blessing on just eating regular grapes?
That's a good question. That's Borei Peri Ha'etz. That is creates the fruits of the vine, of the tree, sorry. When it's just the grapes. It's only
Right.
when it gets turned into a liquid that can be used basically for kiddush or anything else specific. It's funny, right? It's the only one that gets elevated when it turns into a liquid as opposed to demoted by its bracha, blessing. Okay.
What do
Great
we do if
question.
we're eating like multiple things? Does that like let's say you're eating, I don't know, an apple and a piece of bread. Like, do you say both
Great.
blessings?
Great question. 1 second, Gabby. Martin, did you have a question?
You ever answer the potato chip question?
I didn't answer the potato chip question. I'm about to. Thank you for mine. Don't let me finish without answering the potato chip question. So Gabby asked an excellent question, and we mentioned it a little bit, but let's go through this. Let me just see if I say. If I have it in here. No, I don't. Okay, so I should add that in here. So Gabby asked the question, what happens if you have multiple items in front of you? Do you say a blessing on each one? So there's a special rule, a special law if you have a meal with bread. Again, bread meaning one of the 5 grains that you can say hamotzi lechem min haaretz. If you wash and have a hamotzi lechem min haaretz, if you say it on a piece of bread or challah or matzah or pita bread or anything else that's a bread made from these one or more of these 5 grains, then you don't make any other blessings in general during the meal because it is considered a blanket, a covering for the whole meal. Everything else, according to this definition, gets subsumed under it. Now, it used to be that it really was a total primary staple. So everything else really was subsumed underneath it. I wouldn't say that necessarily happens now unless you're eating a sandwich. But we don't necessarily wash for bread unless we're having a sandwich. If we're having meat and legumes, salads and mashed potatoes, we may not wash for bread because why do we want to have bread? We don't need the extra calories or the extra anything. So we generally wash for bread and make the hamotzi when we're having a Shabbat meal, a holiday meal. Actually, I don't remember if I shared this story that my brother met a friend of his in the cafeteria of a hospital in Israel. His friend is a physician. And his friend had regular food at the cafeteria, but he took a piece of bread, he washed on it, and he made the blessing. And then at the end, he said the grace after meal, something that we call benching, which means to bless, but it's become the colloquial term among Orthodox people for saying the grace after meals. And he said to his friend, why you're so rushed? You didn't eat a sandwich. Why was it so important for you to wash and make, and then have the long benching in the end, the blessing afterwards? And he said, that's why I do it. I have such a busy day. I don't have time to say thank you to God over the course of the day. So I make sure, especially on my main meal, that I will wash and have bread so that at the end, I will have the time to do this mini prayer of grace after meals. Now the question is, what happens if you don't wash, right? That would be the question now, Gabby. You didn't wash for bread. Remember, there's a special ritual washing and blessing we say, and then we make the bracha, the blessing on the bread. So what happens if I didn't and I have in front of me, let's say, a cookie, I'm going somewhere and they just have dessert. So there's a cookie and there's, let me think, there are nuts, there are apples, and there's a banana, okay? So let's think how many different blessings. The cookies, if they're made from one of these 5 grains, are a boremi named mizonot. Mizonot means all types of baked goods. So mizonot will be on cakes. Oh, this is the order. Here you go. And then you also have a borei peri ha'etz, one created fruit of the tree on the apple. On the banana, you say borei peri ha'adama. You say it's the fruit of the ground because a tree in the laws of saying blessings must be something that flowers of itself every year and creates fruit and does not need to be replanted. So that covers things like apples, citrus, turns out blueberries, I didn't know that, but blueberries, nuts, all different kinds of nuts except for peanuts. Peanuts have to be replanted, but all the other nuts, pecans, walnuts, cashew nuts, almonds, they're almond tree. There's, I guess, cashew trees, but the peanuts have to be replanted as far as there might be two criteria, so I might not be getting it exactly right. I don't have so much botanical knowledge, but I know that for berries, the only berry that is a borei peri ha'etz creates the fruit of the tree and not creates the fruit of the ground. The only one is blueberries. And of nuts, the only one is not create the fruit of the tree is peanuts, which is create the fruit of the ground. So the first thing, according to our hierarchy, we take mizonot. So we first take the cookie or the cake, we make that. Let's say we're not saying a blessing on wine. The next one will be the apple, when we take a fruit that's from a tree, and then ha'adama is vegetables, but a better way to say vegetables or non-tree fruits. That'd be better. So even though you say banana tree, it doesn't fit the mold or doesn't fit the criteria in Judaism to say borei peri ha'etz. I guess it must be either replanted or another reason why it's not. So there are a lot of fruits and nuances there that you have to find out, but you know, you can make a mistake and then learn and be corrected, and that's okay. So that's what you do. Now, what happens if something like sushi? Sushi is really complicated because what we said was like apples. Apples, you make a borei peri ha'etz. But what if it's applesauce? Applesauce doesn't look like apples, doesn't retain the shape or the texture of apples. So for that, it gets turned, it's like it turns into a liquid. And you say borei peri, sorry, you say shahakol niya bidvaro. That's the most general. And it's all sorts of, I should write this better, applesauce. Because it completely changed its texture and it's not in the form that it grew in. But what if you had applesauce that had chunks of apple in it? You know, some people make chunky applesauce. So then you still have to say borei peri ha'etz on the pieces of apple because they look like apple. And then sushi has in it rice, could have fish, could have vegetables, it could even have fruit like mango. So really the right way to do it is for the first one to pick out like the piece of mango, make a borei peri ha'etz, and then pick out, I don't know, cucumber and make borei peri ha'adama, and then pick out the fish in it if you're having fish and make shakol niya bidvaro. But the truth is that rice is one of those exceptions where even though it's not considered cake or bread by the standards of BROWS, browse, because it's not one of the five grains, you still say borei minei mezonot on rice. I don't know why. So in sushi, I would do first the rice, then the mango, then the cucumber, and then the fish. Does that make sense? And then I would just, from then on, you can just go, have everything. I mean, theoretically, you could just say shakol niya bidvaro and cover everything, but we don't usually do that. We like to make a special bracha for each one if we can, if they are distinguishable on their own. Or like a vegetable soup that has vegetables that you can discern in it. Potato kugel. Everybody here know what a potato kugel is? Or have heard that term? Everybody? How about you, Latoya? Do you know what a potato kugel is?
I think so. Didn't we have kugels, Jeff,
Kugel.
a few times? Yeah.
Yeah, so kugel is some sort of Yiddish word that I guess means mush it all together. I don't know what it means. A souffle or a something, I'm not sure. So potato kugel is a very common staple in Ashkenazic Kiddush time, which is after shul on Shabbat. And what would be the blessing on it? Well, here's the thing. There's some potato kugels where everything gets completely grated and you can't tell that there's potatoes. You might know it's potatoes, but you can't tell. But there are other ones that are very coarsely grated and even have pieces of potato in them. And then you'd have to make the blessing borei peri ha'adama because it still retains its original shape. And potato chips falls into that category. I was really surprised. Because you could say that potato chips are not their original form because they're fried or baked, whatever, but they look like it. They actually look like a slice of potato. So that's why you would say the same original blessing that you said on a potato, but on mashed potatoes, even though you know it's a potato, because it changed its form. And by the way, I make a mash also with, let's see, parsnip, or sometimes I make it with celeriac, that's the celery root. So it looks like mashed potatoes, but it's not. So you don't actually know if it's mashed potatoes unless you tasted it, even though all of those would have the same name, the same blessing. The blessing of Borei Pri Adama created the fruits of the earth. But because it didn't retain its original shape that it grew in, we say the blessing on a mash, a vegetable mash or mush or mashed, whatever it is. But if it had pieces of potato in it, then you would have to say the original blessing. And again, if you're in a meal where you had bread, it covers all the blessing. Some people make a separate blessing on dessert because they say that's not secondary to bread, because dessert doesn't go along with bread. So some people make a blessing on the dessert and some people don't, just to confuse you. So you're fine either way. What else is in here? Okay. Remember one bracha for, okay, so what happens if you have an apple and an orange? And you know you're going to eat both of them. You can take whichever one you like best and make the blessing on it and eat it, and it covers the other fruit. But what if you had apples and then 15 minutes later, somebody brought in grapes? Because you didn't think that you were going to have grapes, you didn't even think in the back of your mind you're going to make a blessing on the grapes. So you have to make a separate blessing. Yes, Martin, what?
Kugel means pudding.
Oh, kugel means pudding. That makes sense. Yeah, like bread pudding or potato pudding. That makes sense. Okay. Thank you. Very helpful. Did somebody here have a question on what I said? Yeah, Jeffrey.
Oh, this isn't on what you said, but when
That's
you
okay.
eat breakfast cereal, which is, let's say, a mazonos, or it could be a shahako, but you have the milk in it.
So
If
it'd be the
it's
same thing. So you really should take the mizonot. You should take, let's say it's Cheerios or anything else made of the 5 grains. Then you want to say, because it's like cookie, that doesn't have to look like the original. Obviously, nobody sits and eats wheat. So you're not going to ever eat the original, but it's made into a food that's edible. So you would say Borei Minei Mizonot, one who made all kinds of baked goods, and then take a little bit of milk. You could even take the milk. Could you take it together with the cereal? Probably. And make a blessing of Shekol Bidvaro on the milk. Yes. So things that are separatable and discernible on their own, you really should make a separate blessing on each one.
Thank you.
So if a single food contains 2 or more components in different categories, make the bracha only on the primary components. So, okay. So that's another way to look at sushi. If you consider sushi that really it's about the rice and everything inside is secondary, you could make a blessing only on the rice. And then that would include it, because without the rice, or I guess theoretically just on the fish, but what would be the primary ingredient for you in the sushi? So for me, I'm not sure that the primary ingredient for me is one or the other. If it's the rice, then you make the blessing on the rice and everything else gets subsumed. But if you like all of them and they're all important to you, then you should make a blessing on each one. This is about washing your hands, and this just tells you how to do it, because if you're eating bread, again, of one of those 5 grains, then you want to make the blessing. Okay. Right. So this is important, actually. The order is this order. If brachot in a meal without bread, but on Shabbat, it's really interesting. You should say first the blessing on the bread, but we make kiddush first. So because we make kiddush first, and you have to sanctify the day before eating, that's why you make the Borei Peri Hagafen, which is the blessing on the wine first. So the word used for washing, that's in this blessing, is not washing per se, but it means nitila, which means taking or lifting up. And the ritual washing, which is a little bit what Jeff said, that we want to elevate our hands to a higher spiritual purpose, which is eating, but eating for the purpose of staying alive and also remembering that we thank God for it. And then these, so you may not know this, but there were different kinds of blessings to say afterwards. There's the grace after meals. That's the really long one. After eating bread or at a meal, or a meal at which bread is eaten. Bracha achrona is a short form, and it has eating a meal or snack at which one is not eating bread, but you ate mizonot. Remember, mizonot is what you say over baked goods. You may have had wine or grape juice. You may have had one of these 5 fruits of the tree, which are some of the species which the land of Israel is blessed in. And there's different things. I don't want to go into that because that's complicated. But at some point we'll spend some time on what these blessings you say afterwards. Borei nefashot is if you have just a drink, or if you have a fruit, and you don't have mizonot or hamotzi, meaning you don't have either baked goods or bread made from one of the 5 grains. How are we doing so far? More or less following it? Wait a minute. Oh, sorry. This is the, I didn't give it a title, so I was a little bit confused. Hold on one second. Insert row above. This is how we fix it in the moment. So this is Birkat Hamazon. Okay, here are some more terms. Shir HaMa'alot is a song that we often sing together on Shabbat or on holidays. Shir HaMa'alot B'Shuv. So when they're all different tunes put to it, it is one of the psalms, and generally it's sung together, and it's sung as an introductory paragraph, just so you know that it exists. It's sung as an introductory paragraph before the grace after meals. A zimun is called to bless God when 3 or more men, or in many communities 3 or more women, have eaten together. Then there is a commandment that we actually praise God, and God appreciates that when we're 3 together, that we say certain verses that elevate God's presence, because God's presence feels elevated when you have more people gathering together. And sometimes it can be 10 people, you add another word, just 10 men, sorry. So just so that you know about it. And then these are the blessings that you say. There are special insertions for Hanukkah, for Purim. Purim's coming up, for Rosh Chodesh, for the holidays, and for Shabbat. Any questions? I mean, you have the source sheet, and I gave you a second source sheet, which is just kind of a cheat sheet for all the blessings over food. I wasn't able to fit in there what food it goes for. Would that be helpful, or do people kind of know now or not? Please be honest. Any thoughts? Here, I'll share that one just so that you see it. So you'll see what I mean. The second source sheet in the email that I sent is just the actual blessings in Hebrew, English, and transliterated. Oh, no, I did write what it's, never mind. I wrote in here a short thing of what it could be for, okay? So it does give you an idea of what to say it on. Now this, actually, I'm going to say this differently. This is only for those who read Hebrew. I don't know if that's Meaningful to anybody. You know that we don't say God's name, so we say something Elokeinu instead of Eloheinu. And I had written Elokeinu, but that can be very confusing. So what I did was I took the word and I added a dash so that it wouldn't be a problem if to throw it away. Have we spoken about that? That you don't want to, no, we don't want to throw away pieces of paper like from a Siddur, a prayer book, or a Torah. We don't just throw it away. We actually have to bury it. So in order to forestall that, I'm doing this. Just changing it. But again, it's only if you read Hebrew. If you don't read Hebrew, this won't be meaningful to you. Okay. This doesn't need it in English. It doesn't need. So if you put a break in with the Hebrew word, it's not, it's as you're not allowed to just throw away God's name. That's the problem. So anyway. Okay. So this is your cheat sheet, and you are totally invited to print it out, to keep it with you. And that way, whenever you want to make a bracha, you can pull it out. And that is a really good way to start with blessings and getting used to saying Hebrew words. Gabby Taylor, how are you feeling? We mostly waited till you came on to talk about it. We only spoke a little bit before.
No, that's fair. I think
How
it's
does
gonna
this
take
feel?
I
Yeah.
think it's gonna take me a little while to get used to doing.
So what I want to suggest for those who are new to it is start with one of them. Start with drinks, because that's something we often do. Coffee, tea, everything except for grape juice. Coffee, tea, water, soft drink, any of those drinks, you can just practice all day saying that blessing. Just say that one for a week, for 2 weeks, until you feel comfortable. And then let's say move to either, I don't know what you eat, but if you eat fruits, you could do it before, and then do that one for another few weeks and keep it with you. And it'll take time. It's like everything else. But as you say it more and more, it'll become second nature. I mean, it might take a little while till it's second nature, but just take one at a time. Take one blessing at a time. It's important.
Okay.
This is a really core value and teaching in Judaism, in Orthodox Judaism. Any questions? I think popcorn, you also say the original blessing, because even though it doesn't look like corn, it's the inside of the corn. So I think you also say, Borei Pri Hadama, who made the fruits of the ground. So it's always a little tricky. If you have a soup that's all mushed up, you would do a shahakol, which is for liquid. But if you have pieces of vegetable in it, then you'd want to say the blessing on vegetables. So I like leaving pieces of vegetable in the soup. It's because I enjoy eating the pieces. So that depends on what it looks like. But I wouldn't worry about those nuances yet. I would first worry about learning to say the blessings. All right. Let's see. I think this is simple class. Let's see what we're going to.
Oh, I just wanted to give a recommendation. There's an
Hi.
app. Hi. I finally got home. Someone recommended this app to me. I think it's called the CRC kosher.
CRC is one of
Yeah.
the better, more well-known and accepted kashrut symbols.
Yes. But if you get the app, you can look up the food that you're eating and they'll tell you what blessing to say on it if you're confused. So it's a pretty expansive library. There are still some things that aren't on it.
Oh,
but
that's
there are a lot
terrific.
of things, yeah. A lot of the times you can see there's a chance that they might have it, so that if you're confused about what blessing to say on your food, it can
That's
help you
terrific.
out. Yeah.
Okay, let us see. How are people feeling about, I'm just trying to think what is important for people to learn about now, other than prayer. do we want to do a little bit of history? Is that helpful? Go through the Bible, the Torah. People, I know some people are probably knowledgeable and some people less so. That's just, any thoughts? I think we've done mostly law, more or less. Would people be interested in the major books? What feels like a good segue now before we do the next? Any thoughts? So the ones that I would say we could do Hebrew calendar again. We
Yeah, I
can
think that would
do,
be helpful going through like all of the months in order and which holidays
Yeah.
are when. Yeah.
great. I've done that before, but I bet most people here didn't do it. How about if we do that next time? Yeah, the Hebrew calendar. Let's do that. That's great. I love that. Thank you, Gabby. Very helpful chiming in. Do you want to put into the chat or
The app
send me
name?
the link? Yeah, and then I'll add it to the next email that I send out.
Yeah, it's called, I believe it's
You
like
can send it
this.
to me by email. You don't have to put in the chat. Send it to me by
Okay,
email and I'll
sorry.
put it into email. Oh, I mean, you could do that too, but
It's
maybe you can get the
here.
direct link. The direct
Yes.
link would be helpful.
Yeah. I'll try to do that and then I'll
Great.
email. Mhm.
Terrific. All right, my friends, as far as I know, we're getting together next week. And always feel free to ask questions. Let me know how you're doing. Different people have reached out to me at different times saying, let's do a check-in. Let's see how, what I need to work on, where I feel comfortable or not. Always feel free to do that. In any case, I know we're only almost in March, but towards the end of the year, which would be around June, we'll for sure want check-ins with everybody to see how everybody's doing, where you're at in your journey, where you feel you need support, where you feel you're doing okay. And always feel free to reach out. Good night, my friends. Take good care. Oh, yeah. Okay. I guess I could copy it.
Yeah, I can email it also a little bit later. I just
Why
found
don't
the
you
link.
email it to me? Well,
Yeah.
I'll come. All right. Thanks, Gabby. Be well, everybody. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.